Hello and welcome to One Piece of Insight. In today's video, we will be continuing our series where we look at the pull rates of all cards across all sets. We'll be continuing with OP-05, Awakening the New Era. I also wanted to say, in celebration of hitting 300 subscribers, as I mentioned I would do in the comments, I'm going to be doing a giveaway for this illustration box number 3, Monkey D. Luffy promo, so stay tuned to the end of the video to find out how to get access to that. All right, let's go ahead and jump right into the analysis. So quickly going through the methodology for how we calculated rarity, we looked at the number of each card type in a set, we looked at the pull rates for each card type in a case, we looked at the average number of each card pulled in a case, and the expected number of pulls per 1,000 cases. Okay, so for OP-05 pull rates, we had 6 leaders with the same 4 pulls per cases as the previous sets, 16 alts, which was the same, 2 secrets, which was the same, 2 secret alts, which was the same. We had 3 mangas in this set as opposed to 1 in the previous sets, 6 SPs as opposed to 4 and 5 in previous sets, a special Oda signature card, and an Oda non-signature card. So where are the differences here? Well, number one, for the mangas, since there are 3, and the pull rates appear to be the same for mangas, each one actually is 3 times as rare as a normal case. For the SPs, because there were 6 and we maintained the same pulls per case, we're now looking at essentially 1 SP per 3 cases of each type of SP. Then we have the Oda signature, which appeared approximately 167 times out of 1,000 cases, and the Oda non-signature, which occurs 2 times per case. So looking at the number of pulls per 1,000 cases, we have mangas at 110 per 1,000 cases, the Oda signature at somewhere between 141 to 167. Now, I put a range here because I tried calculating this in 2 different ways. The 141 comes from looking at the rates of BGS and PSA slab rates, and then the 167 comes from my survey of internet polls to try to find what the average pull rate was for the signature. With these really high variance cards and high rarity cards, it's difficult to get a large enough sample size to feel really confident in the range, so I'm giving a range here. We have the SPs, which are 330 per case, which, if you recall from the last video, is actually the same exact rarity as the mangas from OP-01 through OP-04. And then we have the alt-art secrets, the alt-art leaders, and the alt-arts with the same exact pull rates as OP-04. And then we have the special Oda Luffy, which has 2,000 per 1,000 cases. Okay, so I wanted to talk about the difference between the Gear 5 manga and the Oda signature. Now, in my survey of people's opinions online, there's a lot of differing opinions about whether the Gear 5 is more common or whether the Oda signature is more common. In my research, it appears that the Oda signature is slightly more common than the Gear 5 manga, both in terms of how people are reporting their pulls and cases, and also in terms of how many are being slabbed by PSA and Beckett. And so if you look at these slab rates, we can see that there are actually 28% more Oda signature Luffys than Gear 5 Luffys, making it likely that it is actually a more common card than the Gear 5 Luffy. Next, I wanted to compare the Gear 5 manga in OP-05 to the Shanks manga in OP-01. Now, one of the things you'll notice here is that I mentioned that the Gear 5 manga should be approximately 3 times rarer than the mangas from OP-01 through OP-04, and yet, when we look at the grading data, there's only 27% more Shanks mangas than Gear 5 Luffy mangas. Now, why might that be? And the answer is that the variable that's very difficult for us to control for is print run size. If OP-05 was printed at a much higher rate than OP-01 was, we would expect that there would be a lot less than 3 times as many Shanks as there are Luffys, even though the Luffy should, in theory, be 3 times rarer. And so to test this theory, I actually compared the OP-05 Nami SP with the Shanks manga. Now, we know, based on SP pull rates, that the OP-05 Nami SP is actually exactly the same rarity as the Shanks manga at 330 per 1,000 cases. And so by comparing the PSA and BGS populations of these 2 cards, we can see that there's actually 41% more Namis than there are Shanks, implying that there's likely, at a minimum, 41% more supply of OP-05 cards than there are of OP-01 cards. I think there's also a reason to believe that this should be much higher in terms of what percentage of the total population of cards that are being sent in to be graded. I would expect the Shanks manga to be a higher percentage of the total population for a couple reasons. Number one, it's an older set, so there's been more time to grade them. Number two, it's a more valuable card, and it's known to be a chase card for a lot longer than the OP-05 Nami has. And so for that reason, I think we would expect a higher percentage of the population to be graded. And so I think that if the Nami was graded at the same rate as the Shanks, we would see essentially an even higher rate, showing an even larger difference in the print run size between OP-01 and OP-05. So a couple things to take away from this. Number one, I think this broadly validates the claim that the OP-05 mangas are rarer as a pull ratio than the OP-01 through OP-04 mangas are. But it also points out that print run is really important here, where even though the OP-01 through OP-04 mangas may be easier to pull, if there's less supply of those boxes and fewer of them are ripped, they may not actually be that much more common than the OP-05 Luffy. And so one of my takeaways here was that the OP-05 Luffy was a little bit more common than I expected, given its pull rates. Okay, so here we have our list of our combined OP-01 to OP-05 rarity. So at the top, we have the OP-05 manga, not just the Luffy, but also the Kid and the Law are the rarest we have so far, followed by the Oda Sig. Then we have the OP-01 through 4 mangas, and the OP-05 SP tied at rarity, then the OP-04 SP, the OP-03 SP, and then the OP-01 through 03 alt art leaders, with everything else falling well below that tier. Okay, so some notable cards that I wanted to touch on. So the Luffy manga, we already talked about. It's rarer than other mangas in terms of pull rates. However, the print run for OP-05 is larger, it seems, than at least OP-01, and so for that reason it may not be quite as rare as it appears on its face. The Oda signature, again, it is slightly less rare than the Luffy manga. Whether people prefer the art on this one, whether this one becomes more iconic in the future than the Gear 5 manga, I don't know. I think it's reasonable to argue that it could. I totally understand both sides of that argument, but in terms of sheer rarity, it's a little bit less rare. And then finally, we have the non-signature Oda, which I personally think is a really cool card, and at only $40 right now is a good approximation of the signature. Obviously, it's not exactly the same, but the artwork is cool and it's a very different card. But I do want to caution that it is a quite common card. At 2,000 per 1,000 cases, it's more than twice as common as a typical alt art, so I would not go crazy on this one, even though I think it is a really cool card. Okay, so some possibly underrated cards that I wanted to talk about. So number one, the SPs in OP-05 having the exact same pull rates as the mangas in OP-01 through OP-04, I think is going to be a little bit of a surprise to some people. Now again, if there's more OP-05 than the previous sets, then maybe they're not quite as rare as they would be if they had come from previous sets, but they're still pretty rare cards, and yet they can be generally had for a more affordable price than the other manga cards. I also wanted to point out the Law manga here. It's obviously significantly cheaper than the Luffy manga, but it's still a really cool card, and it is still pretty rare. You know, looking at the PSA population rates, there's actually fewer graded Laws than there are Luffys. There's no reason to suggest that the pull rates are different for any of them. I think there's an argument to be made that it is rarer than other similar mangas that are going for similar prices. And then finally, I wanted to talk about the Luffy leader here. This card is not particularly rare. OP-05 leaders are probably the least rare leader we've encountered so far at 670 pulls per 1,000 cases, and given the print run size, there are a lot of these out there. That said, at only $100, I do think OP-05 is an iconic set. I think a Luffy leader card is going to be something that stands the test of time reasonably well, and so I think there is an argument to be made for this card, even though it is not one of the rarer cards in the set. So that's all I have for OP-05. Thank you again for your time. I hope it was helpful. If you're interested in entering our giveaway for the Luffy Illustration Box Volume 3 promo, please subscribe, like, and comment on this video. You can also gain another entry by liking and commenting on the next video that I post after this. 1 week after that video is out, I will pick someone from the video comments that also liked it, so you can get multiple entries, and then I'll reach out to you to get your contact information to send this to you. So with that, thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, and comment if this is helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.